the rest of the people are slowly but steadily dropping in, I'll kick off with the intro session. I mean, in the end, you're all here for Stephanie, so I don't want to spend too much time on the intro session. But it's a great pleasure to actually welcome you to this session. Super excited about the topic. Stephanie will talk in depth about drones, so I won't do that. I'll just share a few things about myself and then mainly about WeShape Tech, because this session is being hosted by WeShape Tech. So my name you can all read on the slides. I'm a board member of WeShape Tech since 2019, and if I don't spend my free time with promoting more diversity in the tech scene, I'm a co-founder and CMO of the fintech Yokoi that is automating the whole spend management processes of mid-sized and large enterprises worldwide. And this is also why I'm super excited about the tech landscape in general, and in particular about this also very insightful topics like the drones. So enough about myself. What is WeShape Tech? So WeShape Tech is a platform that promotes greater diversity and inclusion in the tech space specifically. How do we do that, or how does that look like? So we have like these 4 pillars. On the one hand, we have like the network pillar, where we share a community of like-minded people and people who are interested in the tech topics, who are already in the tech space or who are just wanting to become part of the tech space. So we support talents through our networks, through empowerments, through connecting different parties to learn more about the tech space. The second pillar is our role model pillars. It's really our goal to make all these incredible women and people with diverse backgrounds in the tech space visible, providing them a stage, be it on a virtual stage like today with Stephanie, or a physical stage like we had the opportunity a few weeks ago with a role model event, or as you can see here, the number we had like each month we publish an interview with a role model from the tech space that shares her knowledge, her insight, her experience of how she came into tech, why she's so excited about tech, and what she learned along the way. And then you also, we have the third pillar, the knowledge sharing pillar. This is also what you take part in today. This involves workshops or webinars or like crash courses in AI or coding or many other exciting topics that we provide to our community to really give you the possibility to learn the tools that make you stronger in the tech space. And then we have our fourth pillar that is for creating like the social awareness and fuel the dialogue, be it with partnering up with like-minded companies that really want to make a difference in the space, or with other organizations and so on. Yes, and then you hopefully have already signed up to the newsletter. So for those who haven't done this yet, that's a monthly dose of inspiration where we really share stories about a role model, where we share exciting and insightful topics such as like community stories, but also wider topics from the diversity space. So we have a blog where we regularly post interesting articles. We're always also on the lookout. So if any one of you has insightful and interesting stories to tell, let us know. And you can also follow us on the different channels. So be it on the Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, please follow us. And also if you like what you see today, share the story. We always like if others also see community participants participating in our events. Yes, and then I already come to Stephanie. I'm super excited to have her here. We met each other, I think, 8 or 9 years ago when we both were working. She was already working so probably 7 years, because she told me that she has been working with drones 7 years. When she was already working for Wingtra, and I was working for another B2B startup, and we met there. And since then, many things has happened. So I'm super excited to have her here today. About Stephanie, so as I said, she has been working with drones since 7 years, is a founding employee of Wingtra, the drone company that she will certainly talk in more depth about in a second. And she has a broad wealth of experience. She has different experiences made, like Stephanie also holds a master in international affairs and governance from the University of St. Gallen, and during her studies she also was in Buenos Aires and Tel Aviv. She was highly engaged in the areas of social business and humanitarian relief aid while pursuing her academic education. She also worked as a personal assistant to a member of the Swiss National Council and a cantonal councillor in Zurich. And her devotion for humanitarian affairs and together political and technological expertise led her to become a member of the Swiss Humanitarian Aid Unit. I'm sure she will maybe talk about that, if not in the presentation, then certainly in the Q&A, because this is a corps of around 700 experts who are on a call in time of need to carry out Switzerland's humanitarian aid project abroad. And Stephanie's focal point lies on new technologies and drones for humanitarian rapid response. And I'm sure she can explain a lot and share a lot of stories about that in just a few seconds. So I'm stopping to share my screen and handing over to Stephanie. I'm super excited to have you here. I'm now just making you a host, but then you can take over.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Melanie, for the introduction. So you mentioned a lot of things that I could share, and I'm happy to share as many things I can. But I also try to focus and not bombard you with all the information at the same time. So today, I would really like to tell you a bit more about drones and how they are actually used to solve some of the world's very hard problems. And especially in the areas of environmental challenges, social challenges. And yes, so my background, shortly, as Melanie also already mentioned, I work in drones, so I have seen a lot of applications all around the globe. And I know pretty much a lot about drones, how they're used. And so I try to give you a bit of insight on the technical side on one side, and also a bit on the application business side and the impact side on the other side. So, I mean, to start, I mean, you all know drones, right? So drones, they are here since a few years. I think they really became a tool, or an acknowledged tool, let's say 5 years ago, maybe, and they are used for all kinds of problems. So they're used, to map infrastructure. So maybe, roads, but also like big sites of complex infrastructure. They are also used in an environmental sector, not only for agriculture, but also for, where you can monitor climate changes and forestry, all these kind of topics. Now, it's actually not a joke, but it used to be done with pigeons. So taking images from the air is actually an old technology, or an old method or science, let's say. But as you can imagine, the images, they were maybe not perfect. And so at some point, people just came up with some different methods where they could use maybe something else to take pictures from the air. And so at some point, people were using balloons, then people were used manned aircrafts, and then finally, people were actually inventing drones. And so the quality of the data, as well as the volume of data that can be collected by drones, is actually unprecedented. And drones are a really great tool to map the world, because they are They are safe, meaning they are, lightweight, autonomous. They're easy to use. They are quick in terms of, you can just, I don't know how many of you have already used drones, but you can basically put them on the ground and steer them manually or plan a short mission. They're rather discreet, so they're small, they're silent. So especially if you have environmental areas where you, example, have, we had a customer, they are monitoring nesting birds. So these nesting birds, they were not disturbed, and so they are quite discreet. They're also versatile. They have all kind of different cameras on them, and can generate all kind of outputs. And then they're relatively cheap. Again, if you compare it to a manned aircraft, balloons, or anything that needs big infrastructures or several operators to actually use them. Now, let me shortly stick with this topic, drones, and guide you through what kind of type of drones exist today. And so the most popular drones that probably you all know are these multi-rotors. So they have like 4 to 8 propellers, depends a bit on the size, and they are very easy to use. So you can just put them down and you can maneuver them wherever you are. So they take off and land vertically, and then you can just fly them around. The problem really is because they cannot benefit from a lift of a wing, for example. So aerodynamically, it's not a really efficient concept. They cannot cover that large area. So in terms of hectares, they're rather used for smaller scale sites, maybe single buildings, single structures, and so on. And so if we want to go more to the larger areas, we also know the concept of fixed wings. So these are like mini airplanes, and they basically just have a wing and a little propeller, and they are really good to cover large areas because of this wing that generates the lift and therefore makes the drone more efficient. On the other side, they can't take off and land vertically, so you need big fields where they can actually take off. You can throw them, or some have catapults, so you launch them into the air. And also for landing, they need quite some space because they can't land just on spot, but they have like a descent like an aircraft. So it's more complex to actually operate them, and therefore the ease of use is not as high. And then there's a third category, which actually came up only in the past few years, and where also Wingtra, the company I work for, is active in. This is kind of the combination of multi-rotors and fixed wing. It's the so-called vertical takeoff and landing category. So this VTOL, which is the abbreviation. And so these type of aircrafts, they have both. They can take off and land vertically with some propellers, but then they have a mechanism where they actually fly like an aircraft as well. So they have a wing, and so they can cover large areas. And so these are a bit the 3 categories of drones and that are mostly used. And the example that I will talk about today are examples that I know firsthand. So these examples are all done with the Wingtra 1, the drone in orange, as you will also maybe spot them in the videos and the images that I show you. And so the science behind using drones for taking images and actually taking actions from those images is called photogrammetry. And so photogrammetry is this science and technology to obtain the information about physical assets within an image. And this is actually not a new technology. So this has started somewhere in the 1850s already, and only then slowly started to begin. They were starting to use this and make sense out of images and actually measure some assets from these images. And I surely want to explain you how this is actually done. So you have an area of interest that you want to map. So let's say this is your area. And then you fly with your drone, you fly in a pattern over this area and you take pictures. And so let's say this blue area is your area of interest. So you have like this grid that you fly over the area, and the goal is obviously to capture the complete area in every picture. And you fly in a way, or you actually trigger the images in a way that all the images have an overlap to the side and an overlap to the front. Because in the end, the goal is to have every single point that is in your area, that it's captured from various angles from these images that you take. because every image has thousands of key points that are unique. And when you have collected all these images and you put them into your processing software, the software, they discover all these unique points in a single image, and then they start to actually match key points with another image. And that's how you have two images of the same object, and you can start to triangulate and calculate, okay, how is this object in space and how far is it from another object? And with that, you really can generate complete maps by taking all these images, and based on these internal and external parameters also from the camera and from the landscape, you can actually put them into a form all together, which then generates the map. So you can see here, these are all the images that were taken. They are sometimes rotated and so on. And then from those images, you have the map below. So it generates this map. And so the output is actually various. So you can generate all kind of outputs from these images. The most popular one are these orthomosaics, as they call it. It's basically a 2D map. So it's a simple 2D map where you have high quality data, so you can really zoom in quite into detail level. So you can imagine that the best cameras today on drones can capture maps that are as good as around 1 centimeter per pixel. That means you can fly over an area of, let's say, 10 football fields in a flight, and you can, if you have a coin, like a 50-grappler, a little coin on the floor, you can actually zoom in and you can see this coin in good quality. Then there are point clouds. This is instead of having a fluent image, you have single points, and you have thousands of these single points, and there it generates a 3D map where you can also zoom around, turn it around. And then there is a digital elevation map, which is very similar to the point cloud. It's also 3D, but it's more picture finished. And from that, you can also, for example, calculate elevation. You see grids of how terrain develops and so on. And from these images, you can create volume calculation. You can display contour lines. You can do all kind of measurements from within those images. And that's the basic science behind why drones are so useful, because you can use these calculations for all kind of applications. But today I would like to talk about the very specific applications, and it's actually where drone is used for mitigation of damage, or where we have an environmental catastrophe, or it's mostly nature-driven, climate change-driven, and where drones could actually help analyze those events, and also help to take action for future action that has to be taken. And the first application I would like to introduce to you, or the first case that we have, is from an incident that happened in 2019, and there a cyclone shove a bulk carrier into a reef in front of an island close to the Solomon Islands. And this incident led to the fact that there was a crack in the hull, and we had an oil spill. And because it was very close to UNESCO World Heritage, it actually also got a lot of media coverage. So I show you a short video, and so you can see what actually happens.
Black, heavy fuel oil mars the blue water and coral reefs of Kungava Bay on Rennell Island and coats kilometres of shoreline. About 100 tonnes of oil is estimated to have leaked from bulk carrier MV Solomon Trader since it ran aground more than a month ago. There's another 600 tonnes still on board. In his first public comments on the disaster, caretaker Prime Minister Rick Ho says the ecological and environmental impact is extensive, much of it irreversible. The health and livelihoods of local communities has also been affected.
So it was quite a bad and sad incident, as all these oil spills are. And so the authorities were calling Canadian experts that are very experienced in shoreline cleanup assessment techniques. So this is something that is, it's a standard process where you actually start analyzing shorelines and start to take action from based on these analytics. So what they did is this Canadian company, they flew to the Solomon Islands there, and they flew over the whole coastal or the affected coastal strip, and you can see one of those orthomosaics that they generated. So this is one of those 2D maps of one of the sectors that they were analyzing. And then they actually divided those beach the beach segments into further segments. So you can see that here. So you see the underlying 2D map, and they were actually segmenting the different beaches according to topographical features, the level of oiling, but also substrate. So in the end, they could say, okay, what action has to be done in which segment? And what is really interesting is that, common practices for these shoreline cleanup techniques are actually educating the people that work in that to draw this by hand. So before this company from Canada, so this is actually Mike, who is the operator of the drone, before Mike had to hand draw happenings from the beach. And so by just having a drone and a very detailed data and images of this shoreline, obviously it's a huge step forward in just having situational awareness, share the data with stakeholders, and so on, and kind of define cleanup action from that. So that's the first use case. Then the next one that I want to talk about is far away from the tropical islands, but it actually goes to Alaska. And in Alaska, there is a very interesting natural phenomenon going on. So in Alaska, there is a big glacier, and behind the glacier, there is a basin, which is also covered in ice, but it's mostly melted. And so there it's more or less an ice lake that is behind the glacier. And the glacier in front of it is also melting. And the glacier in front of it functions like a dam to this lake behind it. And so in 2015, for the first time, this dam glacier in front of this lake started to leak. And so there were floodings from this little lake, or not that little, from the lake behind the glacier. And so since 2015, there is quite some attention to this, to this whole glacier plus the lake behind it, because in a catastrophic event, in case all the water from this lake drains and passes this glacier that works as a dam, it would actually flood the river, and obviously all the surroundings of this river with all the communities and critical infrastructure. And so they started using drones to monitor the movement and also the seasonal flux of this glacier. And I also want to shortly show you a video of how they actually used drones for that.
Drones to fly over the basin, take pictures every 2 seconds in our case, and we process these pictures to get elevation models. And if you compare these elevation models over time, you can actually determine how fast the ice dam you're standing on, how fast it's thinning. And we'll also see the ice in the basin melting very quickly. So right now we know from drone measurements that the ice on average in the basin is about 40 meters thick, which is pretty thin by now actually. And if you lose maybe 6-7 meters per year, you're gonna lose quite a bit of ice.
Yes, so as they mentioned, so the dam itself, so the glacier itself that works as a dam, is also melting. And so yeah, they used the drone, and he mentioned it in the video, to create digital elevation modules. So that means they the digital elevation, so it's basically the elevation of the surface, and with that they can calculate the volume of the thickness of the ice, both from the basin as well as from the glacier that works as a dam. And yeah, so I think it's a really interesting case, and it really can help spot when there is when there is a bigger damage to be expected. As Gabriel, that you could also see in the video, he mentioned that one of the potential threats is also that there is a bridge that is connecting the road system to some of those communities around those glaciers. And obviously, if the bridge is gone, then access to vital resources is gone for these communities. Oops, not again. Then the next use case that I would like to cover is yet a very different region, a very different application. So we go to Kenya, and you maybe have heard in 2020 about this huge locust invasion. So the locust is a little insect, and there are some or seasonal or natural phenomena where they gather to millions, and they just eat whatever is in their way. So basically they eat everything that is green and alive, and it's a huge problem for local communities that live in areas where they really rely on their agricultural farms. And in 2020, this swarm was reported to be 24 times the size of Paris. It's huge. And so here they also used drones, but with a multispectral camera. And multispectral cameras are capturing light that we as a human eye, we can't see it. So it captures not only RGB, which is like red, green, blue, but it also captures near infrared and red edge, which are two other bands that we can't see from visual with us, with our eyes, but it's actually bands that still indicate the healthiness of a plant. And so with the multispectral cameras, you can see, okay, is my vegetation healthy? You can also, it helps you distinguish between different types of vegetation. And so the UN food program, they actually started to work with those local authorities and communities to mitigate those locust impact of them eating all the vegetation. And using these multispectral images help them to actually analyze the damage on one side, but on the other side, it helped them to estimate if the spray that they are using to actually make those animals not eating the vegetation, if they actually help and if they actually work. And so some communities were actually also providing feedback, for example, that those sprays, they were actually also harming other animals. So birds were dying, for example, or livestock got sick of that. So it really helps to on one side estimate the damage, but also estimate, are the actions that we take, are they even effective, and are they even helping our community, or does it actually worsen the circumstance for the local communities? Yes, so this is yet another very insightful application where you can see that these images really help in improving the life of local communities. And then I have a very last application I would like to share with you, and we go back to the US. And you probably also heard from the CCU fire in California. That was actually caused by a thunderstorm where like 11,000 lightning strikes were causing a huge fire in California. It was all over the news. And there also they used drones to capture the damage and to assess on one side, okay, what is the action needed, but also simply for people that own these burnt down houses to see the damage, for insurances and other stakeholders that can make use of those images. And also here, I would like to show you a short video.
My name is John Cornell with the City of Lafayette Police Department. and the Contra Costa County drone team. Over the past 2 days, we have been in Santa Cruz County to, as a mutual aid, call out with cooperation with Alameda County and Stockton Police Department to map the CZU complex fire using drones and software to stitch images together and create a detailed aerial image of the damage caused by the fire. We are doing it to provide not only the citizens but the county and basically anybody else who wants the footage of the damage that was done during the fire. Lots of citizens look forward to seeing it, not only to know if their house has been burned down, but also just to survey the entirety of the damage and how big of an incident it was.
My name is Greg Kretzinger, and I am the Director of Applied Research at GeoAcuity. GeoAcuity is a full-service geospatial consulting firm. We specialize on consulting with public agencies as well as private companies when it comes to rapidly collecting drone imagery, processing it incredibly quickly, visualizing it into maps, and then presenting those as very useful, elegant web layers that can be interacted with both across agencies as well as the public.
In Santa Cruz County, we ran into issues just with the tree cover. The trees here are 100 to 200 feet tall, and the terrain is very hilly, lots of ridges, lots of valleys. Not necessarily the best for drones, especially in the large capacity that we were mapping, several thousand acres to be exact.
Using a traditional fixed wing was really off the table when it comes to finding a proper location to land. It was imperative that we had a VTOL, a drone that takes off vertically and then can transition to get that extended range and map large areas that a fixed wing provides. The Wingtra has the unique capabilities then of transitioning back to a copter and then landing in very tight areas. And without those capabilities, we wouldn't have been successful in mapping and covering as much acreage in such a short period of time.
Yes, and so they managed to collect all this data and actually make it public. So if you Google for CCU map in just now, you get actually to the link where you can also access and scroll around the footage that you just saw. And so from these orthomosaics, you again create situational awareness for house owners, landowners, but also for the authorities to take action and for insurances, right? And so also Greg that you saw in the image, he also mentioned that he saw multiple GoFundMe campaigns, right? That were actually collecting money for people that were affected by the fire. Yes, and that's actually already it from the use cases I wanted to share, and maybe some short takeaways as a summary. First of all, I'm really, really glad personally that the pigeons are not tasked with this task anymore to collect images, but actually that photogrammetry really was taken over by communities, authorities, NGOs, and so on to really capture data and make sense out of this data. And drones are used for it in various applications. They are a really good tool to mitigate the damage and also predict maybe future damage. And what is really nice in all these cases as well to see the collaboration that is so crucial between NGOs, the authorities, but also the private sector, and all bring in their expertise to actually work together on these issues. So thank you so much for the attention, and I'm happy to answer any question that you might have.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. It was super insightful. So I will do the icebreaker, and I'm looking forward to more questions from the audience. So when you look, I mean, you have now been in the drone business and also what it can do for humanity and society itself for a while. where do you see the drones going? So what holds the future of drones? Especially, I'm asking that also because there are so many. There was a time where there were so many drone startups popping up everywhere, and now it feels like it's getting back again. And there are a few that survive in a certain sense, or just maybe found the right sweet spot. So where do you see the drone landscape heading to?
Mm-hmm. I mean, from a technological perspective, I think that the whole drone industry followed quite nicely the curve of an emerging technology, right? So you discover something very useful. Okay, it's drones, and the applications are huge, and the potential is huge. So a lot of companies start to build up products, and they develop, and then at some point, it's about surviving and actually follow through with the promises and actually deliver the quality and the data that you promised. And so that's why we had this we saw that around 2014, 15, where a lot of drone startups emerged, and where also, especially in 2015, there was a lot of funding going into drone startups, especially also in the US from different VCs. It was millions were spent. Unfortunately for those VCs, not too successfully, because many of those drone companies, they have been they don't exist today anymore. And so you have this, the hype curve, and then, the technology curve kind of goes down again and collapses. And then you go through this valley of death, right? Where you really, again, have to be strong and prove that your product specifically is really good. And so then, the whole consolidation starts again. So I think the drone technology made this almost picture perfect, this whole curve. And so you're right, there were a lot of companies, and it's fun to develop a drone. It's fun to just take a propeller and develop it yourself. So many people and many projects, many universities and student projects develop their own drones. But obviously it needs quite some effort, energy, expertise to actually mass produce a drone that is reliable and collects images constantly. And so and still I believe the outlook for drones is huge. I mean, I just presented some of the environmental applications. You can already see they're so diverse. But the big markets will be more in the traditional surveying sector. So our big market at Wingtra, for example, is all in the area of surveying. So, for example, engineering offices that survey an area for construction, or maybe a forest, maybe some, a village to do cadastre maps. Another big sector are mining companies that do volume calculations, that plan for drill and blasting and so on. So it's really surveying, mining, but also construction, where the drones, they just began to be used. So we have now seen that all these early adopters, all these innovators at those companies, they started using drones, and now really the big mass application only lies ahead of us. So I believe the drones they will not go away anymore. So they will be very useful in many applications. Sorry, that was a super long answer.
I just see a follow-up webinars where we will be discussing all these different use cases. There is one question from Angela, and she asked, like, do you face challenges bringing the equipment into other countries? So it's probably not hand luggage. And have you had to deal with significant delays because of that?
Me personally, I had never a problem. So I traveled around with the drone, with the big, like with this orange drone, which is 125. So it's 1 meter, 25 centimeters. And you can do that. So you can just check it in. The batteries, it's not a problem. You just take them on the plane. So that's not an issue. And you can also ship them around. So we have customers in like 90 different countries, I believe, by now. So it's really not an issue to ship them around or travel around them. It's just a bit, bulky, but no major problems that I ever experienced.
And now there is also a question, I think, that deals with you as a salesperson as well. What are the advantages of Wingtra One compared to other VTOL drones?
Yes. So there are different design aspects, basically. So what kind of the common ground for all these VTOL planes are, they have the capability to take off where they are. So they have at least 2 to 4 propellers, and they also have a wing. And then, so for example, our drone is the most minimalistic design that you could imagine, because it's just a single wing and it only has 4 movable parts. So it has 2 propellers and 2 flaps, and that is all that is needed to, you know, with the airstream and flap movement, you can move them in all kind of attitudes in space. So it has really what it needs, and nothing more. And then there are other concepts, for example, that is like a normal airplane, and then they have 4 propellers, and they are called quad planes. And then you have either propellers switching positions or wings turning, so that you can actually go from this vertical to the horizontal movement. And that means that you have more pieces, more electronic parts that have to turn, that have to work. So it's kind of a source of error on the one side, and it's also more weight. So it's a bit more complex in the hardware aspects, and also in that it's more expensive in production, for example. That's one factor, so just the design of the hardware. And then other factors are the cameras that you can carry. So how heavy of an equipment can you carry? So there are different resolutions, different qualities of camera. And so here it's also, I mean, we are really in a sector, so Wingtra is in a sector where we want to deliver high quality images. So we have very high quality cameras, and with that you get also great accuracy of the maps in the end. Yeah. And I could talk about this forever, and I will stop here, but if you have a follow-up question, please let me know.
Yeah, we will also share your information afterwards, so those people can also reach out to you directly.
Please do so.
There is a follow-up question on Maya and Angelo's question. How can you scale, and if you wanted to measure the entire world?
So our drones are designed to map areas anywhere between 20 and, you know, let's say 2,000 hectares. And so this is kind of the sweet spot of the drones. If you want to map the entire world, at some point, depends on the resolution, depends on your budget as well. At some point, it makes sense to use manned aircraft if you really want to go for the big scale, or you just need a lot of Wingtra ones. The biggest, we have some really big projects our customers are doing. We have, for example, one customer, they are mapping some mountain ridges somewhere in the desert in the US, in Nevada, and they have been mapping, I think, like 260 square kilometers, 260,000 square kilometers. There is a webinar online as well where they explain how they did that. So, you know, it's you can do it. It's possible.
So nice. You should send that video so we can add it to the follow-up notes. Can you say anything on image rights? Who is entitled on the image rights you captured?
Yes, so our customers, they own the drone and they own the images. And so we don't have the images. If they're nice, they participate in the use case with us, they share their data, but they are the owner of that. So also these processing softwares that are used to also analyze these images, sometimes they, so I mean, this is also a very fragmented market, and we partner with all those softwares. And sometimes they are, you can use them on desktop, so you have them in-house on your server, or you can also work with cloud solutions. And also there, as you can imagine, some of these applications are very sensitive, or, you know, people don't even want to use the cloud to work with those data. So it is actually a very important aspect that our user and the customer owns their data of their assets.
And then there is also the question of how long is a project running in average, and as a context, there are applications in environmental that are connected to AI, recognizing, for example, plastic particles, not as easy recognizable as a M&M's pack. Do you see your company moving into those services, like offering AI programs?
So it's really diverse. So usually, so Wingtra doesn't provide services. Our customers own the drone and they provide services, or they use it in-house. So it's a, you know, a big big construction company that has their in-house GIS team with drone pilots that actually do the whole work for internal work. And then you have the service providers that do all kind of random projects for their client. And so the projects can be super small, just a one-time flight over, one specific area, or it can be very repetitive. So for example, if you have an area that is changing a lot, for example, a mine or a landfill where you kind of deposit and remove waste, for example, and there you might want to have repetitive maps that are up to date. And so here the drone team maybe flies once a week and generates these maps over and over again, and then you can have, over time, you can actually see the difference and the development of what happens on site. So there is not a specific timeline for a specific project. What is also interesting is many of those maps are actually used for financial audit. So for example, mines or other landfills, quarries, they all have to kind of prove quarterly or annually how much material they took away. And so they have to prove that. And so there you also have these repetitiveness in using this data. AI is slowly getting into the space as well. But I would say there is no provider so far that does this on a large scale. So there are some open source softwares, for example, that can count specific patterns like trees, bushes, for more in the agricultural sector. But it's not yet a very it's not that common actually to go for AI to extract automatically certain patterns from the images.
Isn't that also because you don't have the rights to the images, because you would need the data to actually be able to see patterns and everything? I mean, you could anonymize it, but
exactly. So you could somehow work with synthetic data, maybe. So that's something I was reading about. So I think maybe that is a future thing of making more private and use then AI. I think one of the problems is that the assets that you would like to animate are so individual, right? So for example, if a company is interested in all these M&M packages lying around on beaches and they focus really on these M&M packages, so you need a very specific algorithm that just discovers this. And so I believe that there is a lot of room for taking the most popular cases and then apply AI. And I think that will show up in the future, but right now it's not really a thing.
And then there was another question previously related to also image processing. So what are the biggest challenges with image processing and how is this improving? Heather asks.
It's also a very interesting question, because in the end, the output is all that counts. In the end, as the drone be as boring as possible, but the output should be great, consistently great. I mean, also there we saw a huge development. So from 5 years ago, having these softwares that can process images have been improved so drastically, right? So it gets easier and easier, and basically today we are at a stage, and again, there are different suppliers, but we are at a stage where you can basically take your 100 images, just upload them into a cloud, and you get your result. But then, we're in the tech sector, and a lot of our customers are heavy tech focused, so they want to be able to tweak the wheels themselves, and really make sure that they exactly receive what they want. So it's still, a lot of those softwares still allow for this and really allow you to tweak images, settings, and so on. But yeah, I mean, one of the challenges is actually, it's the science behind it. So surveyors and photogrammetrists, I mean, you can study that. So it's a skill that you need to have, and even though the software help you to create those maps, you still need a lot of knowledge behind it, how to then take action from this and how to apply it then into reality.
And another question is like, how would you rate the ease of piloting your drones, and are your drones also applicable for maritime activities?
I would say our drone is very easy to practice. I could take you to the field here and you would fly it within 10 minutes. So it's really easy, which was also one of the major goals, right? So to make it really accessible without having a master's degree in piloting drones. So that's for sure. Maritime, so the yes and no. So the problem with photogrammetry or with water, let's say, is that as I explained, you have, when you do photogrammetry and you have an image, you have these unique key features in every image, right, that you can detect. But for water, because of the sun and because of the reflection and because of waves, you can't really map water. So this is not possible. You can only map water when it's very not deep, the opposite of deep, and very clear. So if you can actually see the ground, then you can map water, but you're actually mapping the ground below the water. So that's a bit of a tricky application. We nevertheless have a customer, and they are mapping ecosystems of dugons in Australia. So they're actually counting dugons and also their ecosystem and how it evolves. And that works because dugons are in very shallow is the word, in very shallow water, and there it works. But yeah, water is tricky.
Very interesting. There is also a question in terms of scaling up. How is the cost versus quality trade-off? For example, Mavic Mini versus Mavic 3, and related to that, the ease of untrained pilots to run pre-prepared missions.
Yes, so for those who don't know the Mavic, DJI Mavic drones, so they are smaller multi-rotor drones, and so in the end, it's always, it's always about, okay, what is the required output, and it's always about how much time are you spending in the field to actually deploy your drone, to collect the data, switch batteries, let it fly again, and then having the quality that you actually want. And so it's always a topic of that, and in the end, training, I would say, it's not a difference. So training someone for a smaller drone versus the one that we have is more or less the same cost, but then of course the equipment cost is different, and in the end it's like how much do you spend on what is the lifetime cost of your product? And so I think that these are the questions that you have to ask yourself, and sometimes it makes perfect sense to use a small little drone for your small asset, but very quickly actually it makes sense to upgrade your equipment to something that can cover larger areas at a better quality, because in the end you get more out of it.
Mm-hmm. And then I have a final question before we finish the session. For anyone that is now excited about drones and wants to get into the drone, be it a startup, be it a more established company, like how do you get into the drones business? And that, because especially with the aid sector, I know that it's not only the techies that are needed, but what kind of, how do you get into the drones business? Do you need a degree in machine like building, or what are the options?
Yes, and that's a great question. In the end, it really depends on your interest, right? So if you are looking into more of the development side and you want to code the control of a drone, you usually need some kind of mechanical engineering masters, right? You need to be a pro in coding, or be it in hardware development. Also, there most of our people, they come directly out of ETH. That being said, I mean, you can also, for example, at Wingtra, we have position also to become test pilots, and basically there you can just get, if you're interested in flying drones and you want to spend time on the field, you don't need a master's degree for that, and it's an easy way to also just access it. And then if you're interested in the business side, right, for example in sales, obviously it's nice if you have experience with selling a technological product, being used to educate on new technology. I think that's one very interesting aspect. But yeah, I mean, the basis is having great interest and love what you do. And then I think there are be open and curious to just enter such a company. I think that's probably the tip.
Thank you very, very much for your insights, Stephanie. So the last 2 minutes, I will just make a short promotional advertisement of if you click yes, we have next events. Many of them are still in preparation mode, so I couldn't share them here, but stay tuned for a collaboration with TechFace, hashtag we tech together on the International Women's Day on March 8th. And if you go one slide further, as I already said, if you haven't subscribed yet to the newsletter, subscribe now, because this is really a place where you also hear about next events, where you hear about role models and so on. And yes, then I think the last slide is just like share your insights with us, whether you have feedback, whether you have further questions, whether you have ideas for next webinars. We are always looking forward to that. Share your feedback with me. I will hand it over to the other people if it's not related to that. And yeah, thank you very, very much. I think the last slide is just like that. I wish you, if you haven't had lunch yet, that enjoy your lunch. And we really, really hope to see all of you in the next sessions. Again, thank you again, Stephanie, for this super insightful presentation. I think we all learned a lot. Yeah, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. It was really nice being here. Thanks for your interest.
Bye, everyone.